Kaylee, good evening. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to attend our seminar tonight. The hope would be that, and I'll get into goals here in a little bit for what we're trying to accomplish tonight, but practicing with a purpose is our topic. The input from this, it kind of comes about from our program here at Shattuck and in the way that we run the program, and trying to get people to understand, and especially junior golfers, that from a practice standpoint, being able to take it from the driving range to the golf course is our main goal. So playing golf is ultimately what we're striving for. So before we get started, I just want to again thank you for coming out on this rather chilly night. Thank you to Impact Golf, who has been the presenting sponsor for these events. It's a really good idea. This came up. I sit on the junior golf committee, and this came up through the junior golf committee. And thank you to the gentleman with Impact Golf for sponsoring this. Question and answers. If you have those, go ahead and feel free to submit those. But then also, we will have time at the end for some questions as they come up. So if I don't answer it right away or whatever, it may be something that I will get to at the end. So just a little bit on the agenda. Just have a short introduction about myself and kind of what we want to, some goals that we have for tonight. We're going to talk about what types of practice there are. Not all practice is the same. We want to talk about, I think it's important that as you're practicing, why do you not see improvement? And when we're talking, really what we're talking about when we say not improvement, not so much within your golf swing, but within your golf scores, okay? How do we get it from the driving range to the golf course? And then how do we practice? Just give you some different ideas on how we practice. Then we'll kind of finish it up with just kind of what we learned, kind of a recap of the evening. So I do have some videos that I'm going to share with you that are part of this. Bear with me as we go through this. I'm not a techno guy, so a little bit out of my element as far as when we get to the videos and so forth. So it may take me just a few seconds to get the videos uploaded and running for you, but I'll talk about those as we get to them. So my name is Tim DeSarmo. I'm a PGA golf professional going on my 36th year within the PGA of America. I've worked at various club jobs. I was a club professional for a long time. And throughout that, my history of golf, I've had the good fortune to learn from a lot of really good instructors, but also get to see a lot of tour players. I was very fortunate when I started in the golf business, worked at a facility that Jack Nicklaus, Greg Norman, Beth Daniel, Gardner Dickinson taught out of there. Tony Penna was still alive and taught out of there. Jack Rout, who taught Mr. Nicklaus, was still working with him. This was at a facility down in Florida. So that's kind of where my background started. And then I moved on and became working for the Palmer organization through the management company, the Arnold Palmer Golf Management Company. Became a certified instructor with the Arnold Palmer Golf Academy. So this was probably early 90s that started, and I've continued that relationship to this day. And they are now based out of Bay Hill, or they have been based out of Bay Hill. So the concept of the Palmer Academy back when it was started was Mr. Palmer's belief that feeling like golf instruction was getting a little too complicated. So came up with kind of he was kind of the first person that really talked about how to practice within his golf academy. So one of his things was practicing like a pro. And it was in all of our academy instruction. It was one of the things that we always touched on. So that was kind of the start of it. I've been a head men's golf coach at a Division I program at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. Prior to coming to Shattuck, I was at Green Bay Country Club for a long time. I left there, started my own academy, the Tim DeSarmo Golf Academy, at a facility just south of Green Bay. and at that time was the men's coach for Wisconsin Green Bay. Then I had the opportunity at Shattuck to kind of put my love of working with juniors and kind of player development with juniors and getting that aspect of it that I kind of missed at the college level. The college level was much more course management, course strategy, a lot of admin work, not so much as far as player development, just because of the timing of the way the golf seasons work within the program. So I came to Shattuck in March of 2015. The program is in its 9th season. It is a true college prep golf academy. As many of you are aware of with Shattuck, we have the hockey program. We have the figure skating and soccer are the other athletic centers of excellence. Our goal as with the golf academy, the prep academy, is to try to give the individual, the junior, the experience of preparing for college, both academically and through golf specific training with them, as well as the ability to compete in the national tournament schedule on the big stage. So we travel around, we'll play in about 10 tournaments a year. For the most part, in a normal year, we would fly to most of our tournaments. But our practice time, the kids practice for works out to be about 3 hours out of their school day, 2 hours during school, and then about an hour to 2 hours after school. A lot of that time is spent on the topic that we're covering tonight, kind of how to practice and so forth, and practicing with a purpose. Most of our work is that aspect of it, is skill development and less technique development. A number of my students have swing coaches that they work with. We continue to let them, we want them to have that relationship. A big believer in the fact that the more you as a student, as a golfer, knows about your golf swing and take ownership of it, the better off you're going to be. So our goals for this evening, again, we want to give you a better understanding of how to practice. There's a lot of information out there. If you go on the internet, it's a great resource for you as far as different practice. We want to answer that question, why can't I take my range? I hit it really good on the range. We hear this a lot as golf instructors, but I can't take it to the golf course. So we want to talk a little bit about that tonight. I'm going to provide you some resources that we use here, that I use in our program here at Shattuck, a couple of different individuals that I like, and a lot of the material that we're using tonight comes from them. We'll kind of give you that as information at the end. And then we want to improve your overall practice habits. Okay, we want to make your practice more productive. So your time doesn't have to be spent, hour after hour hitting golf balls. We want to develop a routine and have goals as we're going into each practice session. Okay, so as we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of the presentation, there's 4 different types, and you can find different variants of these. Different people have different names for them, but there's about 4 different types of practice. Okay, there's motor pattern acquisition, okay, or foundation practice. There's block practice, random practice, or game-like training, performance testing. Okay, so a well-rounded practice hour, let's say you have an hour to practice, may focus on all 4 of these areas. And I would encourage you that if you have that time, that you incorporate that. In one of the videos that I show Dr. McCabe, he will talk about that. So the first one is the motor pattern acquisition foundation. So foundation is what Dr. McCabe uses for your swing keys. Okay, so this is where you're working with your swing coach, and you're working more on swing keys, some of those types of things. Okay, kind of what we would term your swing fundamentals. So whether it's your grip or swing plane or whatever it may be, the increasing swing speed. There's a bunch of different motor learning that goes on within your instruction. And these are your personal swing keys, okay? Everybody may, not everybody's the same. So as the picture shows here, this is a little bit kind of a little bit of a joke of somebody, but we've all been in this situation where we have all these swing thoughts, okay? And as we're swinging, well, if we had this many swing thoughts, what do we have here? 8 swing thoughts going through my mind as I'm trying to practice, it's not going to be very productive, right? This is also the point where you would introduce if you're using training aids, okay? So your training station would be set up in such a way that whatever your swing coach may have you working on, whether it's alignment aids or swing plane aids or steady head aids, whatever type of things that you have, you would be using within this part of your practice, okay? And this should be incorporated pretty much in all of your practices, okay? We'll talk about how to practice and how to incorporate this down the road in the presentation, but just understand that this is one component, okay? And one of the things we struggle with from a player's perspective is we kind of get hung up in this part of the practice, and it's hard to move from this if we don't move beyond this to playing the game of golf, okay? The next type of practice is block practice, okay? Here's a quote from Mr. Palmer. Success in this game depends less on strength of body than on strength of mind and character, okay? So I put this slide up, one, because I like the quote, but more to point out that block practice would be working through these pyramids of golf balls, okay? And we've all been in that scenario where it's kind of one after the other, right? Okay, finish this pyramid, go on to the next pyramid. Finish this basket of balls, go on to the next one. And we're really just kind of focusing on what we're working on with our swing coach. Okay, so that's block practice. Block practice would be where you're trying to ingrain the skill. It's going to be where you work on your tempo and your rhythm. Okay, again, workstation here when you're in your block practice is very important. Interesting story. I had qualified for the Senior Club Professional Championship down in Florida. Probably, this is a while ago now, maybe 8 years ago. And I'm on the driving range with a bunch of golf professionals before a practice round. And there's probably 30 golf professionals on the driving range. And there wasn't one of us that had any alignment aids out, okay? It was kind of interesting that here we as instructors talk about, you know, good aim, you know, having an alignment stick down, swing plane, whatever. And here's a bunch of golf professionals that teach golf for a living and weren't really practicing with a purpose. We were all just out there kind of hitting golf balls. So it's kind of an interesting story about, you know, practicing what we preach. We don't necessarily, as golf professionals, are the best at it sometimes. The next one is random practice. So this is random practice is where you will work more on kind of being able to develop some skills. Okay, so here's a picture where it shows the 9 ball flights that you can have. Okay, as far as you can hit a high fade, you can hit it straight, you can hit a draw, you can hit different heights. Okay, so this person would be working on their trajectory, they'd be working on their shot shape. So it'd be very random as to what they would be doing. So this is one example of a random practice. Another example may be playing a specific hole on your golf course back home. You're on the driving range and you're like, okay, I'm going to play the first hole. I'm getting ready to go to play an important match. So I'm going to play the first hole. So you tee up, you envision that first hole, and you look out on the driving range and you pick out a target that's going to simulate the narrowness or whatever of the shot you're trying to hit. Then you would hit that tee shot, you would go to the next club. So let's say you have 150 yards in. Okay, what club am I going to hit? And again, you'd pick out a target and how close you can become to that target, because that's how we play golf, right? It is a situation where, from a golf perspective, we are we don't hit the same club over and over for the most part, right? We tee off, we go to the next, and then again, it's varying degrees of wind direction, wind in our face, crosswind, right to left to right. So practicing in all these random situations that happen on the golf course. Okay, that's what we mean by random practice. Around the putting green, okay, it may be hitting a certain shot from with a lofted club and then trying a bump and run shot. Which one works better? Developing some skills from that aspect of it and learning, again, not necessarily you're working on technique here. Technique is going to be kind of worked on in block practice. Random practice, you're starting to work more on skill development. Okay. Then the last one, and this is probably one that we do the least, but is probably the most important along with kind of random, but this is like game-like training. Okay. This is where you're working on performance, okay, and you're going to get a test. So in this example here with this picture, dad might be asking his son, okay, they may have a circle up around the flagstick. You know, we want you to get this shot within that circle, okay? As you're doing this, this is the point where I want to talk a little bit about that your training needs to be measured, okay? So as you're going through your practice, I would encourage you to have a journal that you can keep in your golf bag where you can write down how did your practice go, some swing keys that you had that and what worked, maybe what didn't work. But then you can also work about some performance testing that you did, okay? We do pretty much almost every practice we have with our kids here at Shattuck. When we go to short game is they start with, they have to putt 40 4-foot putts. Sometimes it's a straight uphill putt. Sometimes it's a slice breaking putt. Sometimes it's a hook putt. Sometimes it's the clock drill, 4 feet apart, 4 different, stations on the clock, and they go around it 10 times, and they have to record how many they made. And they also have to record what kind of a putt was it. Was it straight in uphill and so forth. And then as coaches, we're able to go back in and look at their results and know from day to day, are they getting better? Okay. Oh, we see Joey has a hard time with a left or right putt from 4 feet. So it's one of the things that we would work on. This can also be done on the golf course. Okay. So this would be a good time where you get out on the golf course. And one example, if you're familiar with the golf course here at Legacy, we will have our players go out and I'll give them a target score for the first 4 holes. Okay. And if they meet that goal, they can go on and go play, the rest of the 9. If they don't, they start over and they go 1 through 4 again. It's a good way to kind of, again, the goal there is trying to get the understanding that you have to get your round off to a good start. The test should be hard. It should be difficult. So the first 4 holes here at Legacy, the first hole is kind of almost a drivable par 4, kind of a short par 4, reachable par 5 for a number of our players, and then a decent par 4, but not a hard hole, and then kind of a longer par 3. So if somebody were to play those realistically, if they're a below 80 type player, I'm going to give them a goal of even par to 1 under. We want the test to be hard. We got to have, when we're practicing, the practice has to be harder than the game itself, or we don't get any better. That's what our testing and analysis has shown us, that if we don't make the practice more difficult than the game, it doesn't matter if it's ice hockey, tennis, golf, basketball, whatever, any sport, the practice has to be harder than the performance, than the game itself, in order for us to improve. And again, there has to be consequences. So it may be, if you're playing up and down with a buddy, that you play for money, okay? You want to put yourself in pressure practice drills when you're doing this. You want to put yourself under the gun so you can see how you react. So this is all part of that, being able to take it from the golf course, again, to being able to transfer it from hitting balls on the range or around the putting green and chipping green pitching area, to being able to take it out onto the golf course. Okay. All right, so the next thing we're going to get into that we want to talk a little bit about is why we don't improve, okay? So there's some components. I'm going to go through 2 videos, and I'm going to play the videos back to back from that standpoint. So give me a second here so I can get to them. Give me just a second, I'm sorry. Kayleen and I practiced this today and I struggled with it. And of course I'm struggling now just a little bit. And my video's not there. Give me just a second, I'm sorry. Kaylee, if you're out there and want to give me any help, feel free to step in here.
Yeah, it's okay.
Give me just a second. Kaylee, how do I get back to the big screen?
Of your video or of the PowerPoint?
No, of the video of you and I.
We'll just have you stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
A little bit of your computer, just at the top of the Zoom.
Okay, yep. So the problem is when I go to the new share, the thing's not there.
Let's see.
I got it. Just give me a second here.
There we go.
Is it showing up now?
Yep.
Okay, but there's one problem. It's not going to have the sound. Hold on. How do I go back?
Back to your presentation.
No, back to, so I'm going to go ahead and start it. I don't know if it'll play the sound.
Yeah, we can test it out.
So do you really know how to improve?
Yep, you're good.
You find yourself chasing solution after solution, looking for the quick fix, trying to overcome the challenge of today by what you're doing tomorrow, and just finding yourself more and more frustrated in what you're doing. Well, if you're honest with yourself, you're probably going to say, yeah, that's me. Because my experience sitting in this office with some of the best golfers in the world, to the average player who just wants to get better, the truth of the matter is, that's honest. We are chasing our tails when it comes to improving our golf games. It's very difficult for players to get a real pattern of success moving forward. And the reason for that is many times we lack the honesty about what it takes for us to succeed with the actual skills, strengths, and weaknesses we have in our own game. You know, what it takes to improve is a pattern, a process, and a commitment. Golfers in general are terrible practicers. You spend an exorbitant amount of time on the golf course, practice range, putting green, chipping green, but you're actually not doing the things that help you perform better. You enjoy practicing because it's a relaxing part of the game. Look, they build driving ranges out in our communities simply to relax. People go there after work to blow off steam. It'd probably be better if we had that for weight rooms, right? It'd be more beneficial to us. So what happens is when players are going to the driving range just to hit ball after ball after ball, it's not a really good replication of the pressure of playing golf. And it doesn't matter what I call pressure of golf. If you're out playing with expectations of an outcome, that is pressure. So if you're on the 72nd hole of a PGA Tour event, or on the 16th hole of just your Saturday morning match because you love to play, pressure is pressure. Imagine a football team showing up on Wednesday, getting ready to play a big game on the weekend, and practicing like golfers do. You'd have quarterbacks sitting over there throwing 75 fade patterns. You'd have offensive linemen kneeling down, talking to each other. You'd have kickers kicking and talking and kicking 6 balls in a row. The defense wouldn't know where to go. Imagine if we did that. You'd be so frustrated with your favorite team because they'd be poorly prepared. But yet when you look in the mirror when it comes to golf, you many times don't see the same thing. You just repeat the same pattern over and over and over again. So which one of these is you? When I use the word guy, just understand I mean men and women, so it's not sexist. Are you the new teaching aid guy, where you go to the superstore, you go to the big golf shop, you buy the best new teaching aid that some guy said is the best one you have to have, and you go out there and practice it for a week and then you never use it again? It starts collecting dust like your treadmill does? Are you the new online tip guy? Download every online tip imaginable for your swing, trying out everything that people tell you, even though it's not really tailored to you, it's a general approach? Are you the figured it out guy, where every day you leave on Thursday ready because you figured it out, you can't wait to play again? And what you really figured out is the fix for today and not a real good understanding of who you are as a player. Are you the new teacher guy that tries out 16 new teachers a year trying to find the solution? The easy answer when you leave that teacher, man, I'm in the honeymoon phase, it's awesome, it's the greatest teacher ever, I cannot wait to play good. 3 weeks later, you're already searching out a new teacher. Or are you the one round away guy? If I just get one good round in, I'm going to play really good. I know good stuff's coming. And all of those are mental traps. Because the reality is, do you really know how to improve is not consistent with any of those guys. How do I know how to improve is about a process that you have to put in place based on your strengths, based on what you do, where you spend your energy, what you enjoy doing, where you gain the most strokes, where you lose the most strokes, based on what you're capable of doing. Like physically, are you able to do everything you want to do in the swing? That's why I'm a big proponent of the Titleist Performance Institute's screen and working with coaches that are TPI certified, because they know what your body is able to do and build a swing around it. So if you don't know how to improve and don't know how to put the pieces together, then you're going to fall into the trap of being one of those guys that's always one round away, 1-8 away, one big tip, talking to everybody on the range, asking them how you can get better. And more than likely, you're also the one walking around telling everybody how they should get better, and yet you're still struggling in your game. The attacker model is all about having a process in place on how you train, how you test yourself, how you prepare for the big moments, how you compete in the moments, and then how you evaluate at the end. It's a simple model. It's been proven over and over and over again. But you got to let down psychologically. Allow yourself to be vulnerable and learn about what it takes to get better with proven strategies that have shown success at the highest level. It's about knowing you, going in to understand your psychological DNA, and more importantly, building a plan to achieve what you want. Let's abandon and get rid of all those biases that we have that are preventing us from being successful. Let's build a plan to be successful, and let's go get it.
So I'm going to go right into the next video.
Hey, look, you've been sold a bill of goods. And that bill of goods, sorry, not real good. And the reason is that when you look at golf magazines and golf instruction videos for so long, they're selling this perspective in golf that golf is a game where magic happens and it's the romantic play, and we've written books about how you have the spiritual experience that happens. And what's happened from a training model is that we've gotten lazy. We're not developing golfers like we develop other athletes. When I look at the training curriculums in baseball, tennis, basketball, football, it does not look a thing like golf. And yet the players in golf are getting more athletic, more successful, and really better. So what happens if we take a look at the way we train and do it better in general? But before we do that, let's break down the 5 myths that I've heard over the years that drive me absolutely bonkers. First is that, hey, golfer man, golfer lady, if you go out and just hit balls, it's going to transfer to the golf course, because if you focus on what you're doing on the range, it will transfer to the golf course. Well, here's what I want you to understand. The driving range and the golf course are 2 completely different environments. Golf is one of the very few sports where we cannot simulate competition. And your training ground doesn't look a thing like where you practice. So where you compete looks completely different. The driving range, 150 yards wide, multiple people hitting to static targets. You get to choose the same shot over and over and over again if you want. The golf ball that you're hitting doesn't really perform like the golf ball you hit on the golf course. Many times the grasses are different. And so you have to look at the training ground from a different perspective. It's a readying ground, not a, oh, I'm going to get my confidence ground. You got to play a lot to play better. So let's understand the differences there and realize that the way it transfers off the range is that there's a training model, which is a part of the attacker process. There's a model in place to help you perform better. Okay, 2. When you're training and you're playing golf, and you gotta be calm. You gotta find your Zen moment. Yeah, okay, that doesn't work. Every one of you is different, and every one of you has a different perspective on life and gets excited by different things. And I mean, some of you get excited if you get an extra nugget in your nugget meal, and some of you get excited if you have 2 days off, and some of you panic with that. Golf's the same way. It's what makes golf great is that you can play for a lifetime. So from a training perspective, from a competition perspective, you have to understand that you have to bring your own personality to the game. I've worked with many players who have been told over the years, you have to be calm and still and clear your mind over the ball. And yet when I'm talking to them, they're all over the place and their hands are bouncing and they're on the phone and they're doing 4 different things. So you're going to take somebody who has a super ADD mind and ask them to be calm. Okay, way to take the joy out of the game for them. Why don't we find their personality and let them be them? They probably enjoy it. All right. The third major myth I hear in golf is that you got to hit thousands of balls a day in order to be great. Then why don't my tour players? They don't hit thousands of balls a day, and yet they're really good. Oh, it's because they're talented. Well, no, it's because they have a training system that helps them perform at their best. It's the reason why we've seen 24 top 10s in the last year and 7 or 8 worldwide victories. Is because every one of them has their own training module. They know when they need time off and they know when they need to train. And when they train from efficiency. They don't bust blisters on the range. Because for some of those players, the longer they stay out there, the more they rob from their belief bank. They start finding things to worry about instead of trusting themselves. So come on, we can be better. 4. The fourth training myth is that everybody should be trained the same. Nope. When I sit down with my old coach, who was a brilliant leader of men, he said that every person that I interacted with was different. So when we see training models, or you go to a coach and you say, oh, this coach was horrendous for me, but he was great for my friend. Like, that's something wrong. You need to understand that just like eating food, we all have our own cuisines and we need to embrace that. The last one, it's important, is that if I can drive it in play, I can play. Well, that's not necessarily untrue, but what I want you to understand is that training should follow how you statistically play on the golf course. So you should be looking at ways to score. And when I take young players out or people who are just now learning, it's very difficult for them to score when they can't get the ball off the tee. But it's even more punishing when they get around the green and they can't get the ball up and down in 5. So we need to study and train where we make our strokes, where we make our mistakes, and where we gain the most. We need to get better there, and we need to enhance the fun of it. If you're a college player or somebody who's aspiring to be a professional, you need to look at your game and realize where you have your superpowers. You got to look at where you make your simple mistakes, and more importantly, where you can actually gain the most on the field. I had a conversation with 2 tour players one year. We were at the PGA Championship, and we're walking off the 9th tee box. One of my players is there, and he's been brilliant with the way he trains, and as a result, his performance has been there. And another player who was just one of his buddies, and we were walking down the course, and one of the playing partners was a coach in the college ranks who's a PGA professional, so he had qualified to play in the PGA Championship. And he said, guys, I want to know, what are the biggest things that my players need to prepare for in order to turn pro? And both of those tour players stopped. Now, these are multiple winners on the PGA Tour. They've won millions upon millions of dollars. They fly private, okay? Give you an understanding. And they both looked at the coach and they said, you guys train for all the very improbable, impossible shots. You can't hit the ball off the tee and play, for the most part. And this is college players. They're all about speed, speed, speed. I'll go find it, but they can't get the ball out of the trees. Or, as this other player said, if I put a ball in front of a green, they're going to struggle to get the ball up and down in competition. The easy shots, the short putts. That's just throwing strokes away. So training must match that. Now, you're going to say, wait a minute, you just said don't spend so much time on the tee. No. What I'm saying is you need to look at your game and understand how you perform. I know for me, my biggest mistake is I give up a lot of shots off the tee. I also gain a lot of shots off the tee. So it depends on the day that I'm going to have. So I have to be better, and I have to learn and train myself to have an alternative driving club in order to put the ball in play. So as an athlete, I have to know what helps me succeed, and I have to train that way. Many of the other facets are there because of my long-term training. Training doesn't go anywhere. Sometimes it just needs to be uncovered. So let's bust these myths and let's train better to be better.
Okay, Kaylee, is my screen back?
Yep, you're all set.
All right, good, thank you. All right, so some takeaways from the videos, and not all of it is necessarily pertinent to our topic tonight, but the first video where he talks about why we don't improve or how we, do you know how to improve? The biggest thing to take from that would be that our goal is to replicate our practice to being able to take it to the golf course, correct? That's kind of one of the big takeaways from that. The other thing that I think that's important from that aspect of it is the aspect of keeping your stats when you play your round and understanding where do I gain my strokes and then where do I lose my strokes. And your practice should be centered around those two components, okay? What do I do really well? What do I, where are my weaknesses? If I'm a poor lag putter, then I need to spend a fair amount of time doing drills and exercises that are going to improve my lag putting. But if I'm a really good driver of the golf ball, I need to make sure that I don't weaken that area and that I stay really good with that. So practice what you do really well, practice the things that you need to improve on. Those are two important components that you would take away out of that video. The other part of it is, as you get into the myths, is that practicing on the range doesn't necessarily transfer to the golf course. You need to play. You need to play a lot. The be calm scenario, the takeaway from there is that everybody's different, okay? So one person might like to hit a ton of golf balls, but do it in a way that's productive, and somebody else may like to practice short game one day and then long game the next day and then play. So everybody's different. So one practice routine doesn't necessarily fit for everybody. You need to find what works for you. You don't have to hit 1,000 golf balls a day to be great. There's another slide that's coming up that talks a little bit about that as well. Again, everybody doesn't train the same way. So as a coach, one of the things that I have to do with our players here at Shattuck is, how does this player like to practice? How does this player like to practice? So on a given day, one person might be doing one thing and then another player might be doing a totally different thing based off of how they practice, where they need their work, what they do well. But also there's some key fundamentals that we do work on. Short putts, 4-footers. Every single day, everybody does that. So there are some things where we do everything the same, but we also tailor the practice to what the player needs from that standpoint. And your swing coach should be able to help you with that. How do I need to practice? What do I need to practice? Okay. So this is another resource. It's called Golf State of Mind, Dr. McKenzie. His 5 practice mistakes golfers make. More balls lead to change. Okay, and that's not necessarily true. There's a saying that some golf pros use that, practice makes perfect. We would typically say practice makes permanent, okay? So just hitting more balls doesn't necessarily lead to change. You need to be able to, it might work in your block practice, but can you do it under pressure, Okay, so that's when you know that the change is working. A lot of good shots in practice is a sign of improvement. Again, not necessarily so. It might make you feel good, and that's the reason that a lot of times we'll sit there and hit 57 irons in a row at a specific stagnant target and not change our target, because we kind of get into a groove and a rhythm, but we don't play golf that way, so it's hard to take it to the golf course when we do that. You could play a whole round and never hit a 7-iron, especially nowadays as kids are getting longer, and so forth. A lot of my kids, they'll practice with a 3-iron because they're like, coach, if I can hit a 3-iron, I know I can hit everything else. And I'll be like, okay, how many 3-irons do you hit in your round? You might hit it into a par 5, and if there's a longer par 3. So you may hit it once or twice around, okay? So it's great if you practice it in the random practice, okay, where you drive it off the driving range tee and you're like, okay, now this is a 3-iron second shot into a par 5, then I'd be okay with it. But to sit there and hit 20 3-irons in a row really accomplishes nothing other than, yeah, if you get by the 20th ball, you're probably going to be hitting it fairly well, okay? But you really haven't been able to transfer that to the golf course. Practice should be enjoyable. This is an interesting one. Again, like I talked about earlier, practice should be hard, okay? Yes, we want it to be enjoyable. We want you to come back the next day. We don't want it to be so, I'll use, for me, fitness and so forth. If I'm working out and I get with a trainer, we're doing something and it gets too difficult, you might not see me for a while, okay? Because I'm sore, I didn't feel like I got anything out of it. So it does need to be hard, but not to the point that we don't see some success. We want to see some success with it. So use up and down drill, okay? So let's say you're around your putting green at home or chipping green, and you're doing 9 holes of up and down. Let's say you finish that day at 1 over par, okay? And your goal was 3 over par. It can't be more than 3 over par. So you achieved your goal. So the next day, either lower your expectation number to 1 over or even, or toughen the holes up, okay? Do tougher holes around there, and gradually work up to where you're hitting all different kinds of shots: uphill, downhill, side hill lies, ball sitting up, ball down in the grass, those types of things. Technical skills are the same as performance skills, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here as we get into the skill development and technical here in just a little bit, but that's not true, okay? It is, they're two different things. Technical, that's kind of your motor acquisition time. Performance is going to be your random practice where you're working on developing some skill sets. Practice and playing are two different things. That's not true. That's where we struggle from converting the driving range performance to the golf courses. We see them as different, and we need to make our practice way more similar to what we do on the golf course. All right, how to practice with a purpose. Okay, I'm going to skip the video just because of timing, where we're getting to, but Dr. McCabe, what he talks about is, you can, I'll talk a little bit at the end as far as resources, but he basically, every practice session, he talks about a warm-up, talks about foundation, he talks about performance, and he talks about test. So every time, that's when he was talking about how his players practice, this is what they do. So he talks about during your warm-up, you warm up. You might take, and he actually talks about in the video, starting with a 7-iron or a 5-iron or something like that, and just ripping golf balls, okay? Get loose, get the sweat going, but you're not worrying about where the golf ball is going or what it's doing at that time, okay? It's just purely a warm-up. Then you get into foundation, so that's that motor acquisition and kind of your block practice, where you're working on, if you're working on swing plane or whatever it may be, if you're working on increasing speed or the bottom of your swing arc, any of those types of things, then you are in a situation where you're kind of working on your foundation. And the best way to do it would be like, okay, I'm going to do 20 golf balls, whatever, set a number aside, pull those golf balls aside, okay? Then you're going to get into performance. So this would be kind of the random practice where you're changing clubs, you're changing targets. maybe you're trying to hit a flop shot, whatever. If you're working on your short game, at this point in time, you're doing some different type things. So performance would not just be pounding golf balls on the range. It would be incorporating short game practice as part of that. And then the testing part becomes, okay, I got to hit so many balls within, if you have flags out on your driving range, you're going to pick 2 flags, and I'm going to hit 14 drivers, because that's how many drivers I'm going to hit in this upcoming tournament. And I'm going to count how many I do, how many I hit in the fairway and such. And then you're going to write it down in your book. Okay, today I hit 7 out of 14. So the next time you come back and practice, you would try it again. And again, you would test yourself. The biggest thing to do is to come up with, if you are giving yourself an expectation, what's the consequence if I don't meet that expectation? Okay, so for parents that are out here listening, might be an opportunity for you that, okay, we're going to do, and again, I'm going to use the 9-hole up and down drill around a putting green, because it's a real easy one for you to kind of visualize doing. You have to do it in 2 over par, okay, or less. Okay, and if you don't, tonight you're going to have to wash dishes after dinner, or we're going to take your phone away for 30 minutes, or some type of consequence. There's been people that have talked about, doing push-ups. Okay, I have to make 10 putts in a row. And if I can't make 10 4-footers in a row, I have to do 10 push-ups. So they walk off to the side of, any of that type of thing, there has to be a consequence. Okay. Technique versus skill development. So when we're practicing, so a technique is a movement pattern used to produce end performance. Okay, and the skill is the ability to produce the desired performance or outcome. Okay, so it's kind of block practice would be more technique, random practice would be more skill development, trying to hit different type shots, hitting it high, hitting it low, those are skills. Having my stock shot that I can go to all the time, that's when I'm working on technique. That I'm kind of doing in my block practice. Now, you need to do your technique also out on the golf course during some practice time. You need to be able to say, okay, I'm kind of working on this swing thought. I'm going to have this swing thought when I go out and play a couple of holes tonight, and see how it does on the golf course. And can I stay with it on the golf course? And your thought process is, maybe it's 9 holes and you're working on something that your coach is working with you on. I'm going to do it for this 9 holes and see how I do. And I'm going to stick with it no matter what I do. That's being able to take your practice from the driving range to the golf course. So here we're talking about the context of your training. Okay, so you can see there's kind of high context, low context. So are you the individual that changes clubs after each shot, or do you hit the same club over and over? Okay. Do I use a full routine for each shot, or never move from the spot? Okay. So we haven't really talked a whole lot about pre-shot routine, but if you want your practice to be of high caliber to be able to take to the golf course, I would encourage you, go through your routine on every practice shot. Interesting story I tell the kids here at Shattuck all the time in my work when I started in the golf business with Mr. Nicholas. I worked for him for 7 years at Loxahatchee Club down in Jupiter, Florida. I never saw him hit a shot without going through his routine. For the adults in the room that have seen him play, he's got a very distinct routine that he does. He did it on every single shot. I don't think he could hit a golf ball without doing it. Okay, so routine practice, your pre-shot routine is extremely important. Do you change targets each shot, or do you stay with the same target all the time? Even if you're hitting wedges, okay, and you kind of have the typical range that has a 100-yard flag or pole, you still have to try to find a different angle, find a tree or something in the distance that you can use to kind of change your target. Narrow boundaries, okay, between certain flags, between certain trees at the end of the driving range, or do you just kind of practice with the range being wide open? Greens and flags versus no targets. Okay, pretty self-explanatory there. Putting myself under pressure, it's important. Okay, emotionally, if we try to keep it easy, again, like I said, practice has to be hard in order to get anything out of it. competition, okay? Compete. If your parents are there, mom or dad are there watching you, you know, make a bet with them. Do something that's going to put you under pressure. Or do you, no competition. If you're on the putting green, putting for some money is a good way to kind of go about doing that. Getting comfortable with observers around. When you go play in tournaments, okay, you're playing with other players. There may be spectators. If you're the type of individual that gets uncomfortable with that, how are people going to react to my golf game? Then you need to put yourself into there. So if you're one that always practices kind of off on your own, okay, put yourself in the opposite, okay? Put yourself in a situation where there's other people around and they can see you, okay? They can hear those bad shots happening and so forth, and you get comfortable with that. Is there a consequence for your result? Again, we've talked a lot about consequence, being able to measure. Result does not matter, okay? It does matter, okay? So if you're the low context individual, try to flip yourself over to that high context. Lies change, right? When you're on the golf course, situation change, wind, direction. So if you're fortunate enough and you have tee boxes on both ends and you're able to practice off of them, if you have, like for me, a left to right wind, it is a difficult shot, make sure I practice in that, okay? Put myself in that situation. All right, how to practice with a purpose. Again, just competitive part of it, the training phase, testing phase. Again, games, challenges that apply under pressure. Put yourself in a situation where every shot counts. Each shot is unique, time, okay? You have time between shots. So if you have to practice in a situation where, okay, I've seen golf coaches that instead of having the pile of balls right behind their player, they may set them 10 yards behind them and the player has to walk back, get a golf ball, bring it up, hit it, walk back. Again, those are all things that can kind of help with your routine and your practice. A great story that I've heard of Tiger Woods talking about putting himself in that position. A friend of mine for the Palmer Academy was at Tiger's course down in Orlando. They were on the back of the range. He was with a friend of his who was a teacher, and Tiger was hitting balls down on the same end of the range, but on the opposite side of the tee box. And between each shot, Tiger would hit, and then he'd run out to the 100-yard flag and run back. Then he'd hit a shot, and then he'd run out and run back. My friend asked the other golf professional that was there with him that knew Tiger a little bit and said, what is he doing? And he said, he's trying to get his heart rate up. He's trying to put himself in that pressure situation. Because when we get under pressure, our heartbeat goes up. So again, trying to mimic each shot being unique and how we feel on the golf course. So it stimulates how we feel if we practice correctly. It teaches us to control the mental and emotional state during stress. Every round is going to have stress, correct? You're at some point in time, you're going to go under stress, whether it's hitting a ball in a penalty area, hitting a ball out of bounds, missing a couple of short putts, whatever, that stress level is going to go up. The more prepared you are, that you've done your practice correctly, you'll be able to handle that situation. It'll help you improve your focus. It'll develop a performance process that works for you. What kind of a process do I need for my practice? Increase your confidence, okay? Indicator of strength and weaknesses. Again, we've talked about work on your strengths, work on your weaknesses. Things that are in between. So if you don't hit a lot of 7-irons, you shouldn't be practicing with a lot of 7-irons per se. And then again, we got to add consequences and raise the intensity. All right. So what have we learned tonight? Okay, we're getting near the end here. Then we'll kind of open it up for questions here at the end. So that we've learned that there's different types of practice, right? There's where you're working on your skill. There's the foundation, you're working on your swing fundamentals. There's block practice where you're trying to ingrain those swing traits. And then there's random practice where you're kind of working on trying to develop some skill development. And then the last one is putting yourself into game-like situations. So for each practice, I would encourage you to have some goals to go in for your practice. Okay, what am I trying to achieve out of this? Is this going to be more of a block practice tonight, which is okay, but I still have to incorporate some of the other stuff, but I may lean a little heavier on block practice than I would on random practice tonight. I may practice the driver tonight more than I may practice short game. I always encourage people to start with short game, at least get a little bit of that in when they practice, because we've all been on the driving range where we're hitting golf balls and we're like, okay, one more good one. And then it's not that one. And then you keep saying one more good one, one more good one. And the next thing you know, your time's up and you don't have time to go practice your short game. So I would practice that short game, a little bit of it at least first, so at least you get some of that work in. Your practice has to replicate playing the game of golf. Your practice has to be measured, okay? And use your journal, write in some notes, write in how you're performing. How many fairways did I hit tonight? How many up and downs, how was my up and down percentage, whatever it may be. Also, when you keep stats during your rounds, right? Then you kind of know what you need to practice and what you do well. Talked about the journal. Understanding why we don't improve is an important component, right? We don't improve just by beating golf balls. We don't improve by just kind of randomly hitting putts or randomly having a basket of balls there and chipping to the same target around a putting green over and over to the same target. That doesn't necessarily, it gives us a little bit of feel, but if we hit enough golf balls, we'll develop that feel for that length shot. So we have to vary the targets, okay? How to practice again with a purpose. We talked about that. Understanding of technique versus skill. It's a big thing. Especially we do a lot of our practice here at Shattuck is skill development, okay? A lot of the players that come are pretty good players. They just haven't had the ability to practice every day and work on it. Interesting story for University of Minnesota. I don't know if this is still the case today, but when I first started here at Shattuck and had met with the coach, Mr. Smith, Justin, he was saying that for both the men's and the women's program, their scoring averages were better in the spring than they were in the fall. A little different. Northern school, you would think it would be the opposite, right? They don't get a chance to practice or play as much during the winter time. But what they found was they were able to work more on skill development, putting, short game, those types of things that really help with the scoring. Again, we kind of talked a lot about being able to take your range game to the golf course, keep stats for your rounds, and then kind of hear my last quote, again, practice makes perfect. That's wrong. I want you to think perfect practice makes perfect, right? If we practice the right way, we're going to be able to take it to the golf course. All right, here's some resources for you to use, okay? First one we talked about was Dr. McCabe. He has a program that we use. It's called the Attacker Model. It's about 20 chapters long. You saw 2 tonight. He gets into how to practice, some mental approach type stuff, a lot of different drills and exercises. It's a really good resource that I would encourage you to take a look at. Another one that we talked about tonight was Golf State of Mind with David McKenzie, and there's his website. There's a book called The Practice Manual. And again, some of this stuff that I used tonight came out of that from Adam Young. And then it's probably, the book is probably maybe a little bit more geared towards older juniors or adults to kind of be able to use to kind of help with your junior, with your son or daughter in their practice habits. It's a really good book from that standpoint. And then you have my address, my email address there, if at any time you have questions from that standpoint. So Kaylee, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions, but I need to figure out how to get back to the main screen.
Yeah, so we have a couple questions that came in. The first one being, I guess, if you would have any tips of how someone can help develop a junior who struggles with anxiety of competition and expects perfection every time.
So again, that's a little bit of a mental approach topic, but also from a practice perspective. again, like we talked about, Dr. McCabe talked about it a little bit. It's about understanding your player and putting them in situations that kind of replicate what we do on the golf course. The anxiety part is a difficult in terms from juniors' perspective. That again, the better you practice and have good habits that way, you start to see I've seen that those things have kind of gone full circle from that perspective.
Then we had one other question around the topic of younger juniors is how could we balance practice to improve and grind to make sure that things are fun, but still making sure we're making progress?
So, there we go. All right. So we want your practice to be fun, but we want it to be hard. So I think if you challenge yourself in a way that you're motivating yourself to get better, you will see that. We don't necessarily, want to be in a situation where your practice isn't fun. The balance, again, I would encourage, especially from juniors' perspective, play as much as you can. Okay. If you're working with your coach and you're going through some swing changes, yes, you got to ingrain those habits, but you also need to be able to take it onto the golf course. So from that standpoint, it's important that, that we see that, that they're able to do, kind of get on the golf course and play. I grew up, and I think, if I remember correctly, talking a little bit or listening to some of the other, like Luke was talking about, kind of practicing in his basement, hitting some balls. I grew up, I never hit a range ball. We didn't have a range at the facility I grew up on, but we played, I played 54 holes a day. As a kid, we just kept going around and around and around. So playing is extremely important.
Awesome. We had another question come in stating, my practice usually consists of driving range or playing. Should importance be placed on one or the other, and perhaps a different part of my golf game?
So they're both important. The thing that I want you to take away from tonight is I want your practice to be more like playing. Okay. So if you kind of have pretty good fundamentals ingrained and you're kind of just going to hit balls, then make sure you incorporate that random practice. You incorporate that competitive performance test type situation in your practice. Okay. Because a lot of times you can't get on the golf course, right? As juniors, if you belong to a club, if it's a men's night and you're out after if you're working in the summertime and you get done at 3-4 o'clock, you want to go, you might not be able to get on the golf course. We understand that. So then make your practice like you're playing. Get it to the point to where you can take what you're doing on the driving range and take it to the golf course. I always have my players, if they're hitting it really good and we can get on the golf course, I'm like, all right, let's go play. Let's go. We're going to go play holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to try to shoot as low as we can. One of the things that I see with juniors when we play is you need to have your play be as competitive as it can be. We fall into the trap of we miss a short putt and we're like, oh, I'll just rake that one back. And if I make it 3 times in a row, it counts. Or whatever game we kind of play within ourselves. Okay. You're not doing yourself any service or justice from that aspect of it. You got to be in a situation where you can, know what your score is. So you're able to kind of gauge how you're doing from that aspect of it. So, and then get into a situation, The other thing, we didn't really talk a lot about it, but like was practicing before a tournament round. Okay. I'm a big believer that when you're warming up, that's what you're going there for. You're going to warm up, get loose, kind of get some sense and feel of what your body's feeling that day, but you're not trying to find the secret sauce for that round, right? It's too late at that point in time. Some days you may wake up and you hit a nice little draw, and the next day you wake up and it's a little fade. That's the way golf is. Sometimes grip tension, things change, our mood changes, and things like that. So remember, warm up is warm up. Okay, yeah, we're trying to find some sense of to what my golf ball is doing that day, but how I warm up really doesn't have any bearing on once I get to that first tee, right? It's about playing the game, getting the golf ball in the hole as fast as I can. Anything else out there, Kaylee? I see.
I think we got most of the questions that came in, but again, if people haven't gotten your email before and they'd like to reach out, definitely do that. And then if you need anything from Minnesota Junior Golf, we can always connect anybody to Tim in the future as well. So thank you, Tim, for all you had to
Thank
share.
you. Yeah. So next week's topic is on short game.
Yes.
So for juniors, great subject. Okay. It's the one area that separates the really good players from the average player to the whatever. So the elite players, no matter what level you are at, have really good short games. We utilize the Blast Motion app training device. And so every week I get the tour statistics through Blast Motion, and it's amazing how many of the players that rank up within up and downs, putting, whatever, are usually within the top 10 within the field that week. So next week's topic will be a really good one for you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks again, Tim, and thanks
Thank you.
for joining.
Thank you,
tonight.
everybody. So it won't be long. It's supposed to be 35 next Monday.
Yes,
So
exactly.
You guys will all be in shorts and shoveling the snow off your mats and hitting some balls out in the snow. So
Exactly. Awesome. Well,
all right. Thank you.
Thank you.